Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the United Stand. This is your latest Manchester United news as news comes in that Ralf Rangnick has been offered a job out of Manchester United. The Austrian FA apparently have flown into Manchester to discuss him taking over as the manager of Austria. Is this a massive blow for Manchester United, or is it to be expected as yet again we've been lied to, we've been spun in relation to what Ralf Rangnick was brought into Manchester United to do? We'll also talk about the dressing room and club split in relation to Ten Hag, and Pochettino continues to impress Manchester United as well. Lots to talk about. Sorry I'm a little bit late. Got involved in a little bit of a Twitter debate with a Manchester Evening News journalist who basically responded to a tweet of mine saying that just because Twitter people want Pochettino doesn't mean it's reflective of match-going fans and other people who will support the manager regardless. And I to be honest, that particular paper gets on my nerves a little bit. There are others as well. Most match-going fans I know, which is quite a lot, are on Twitter. I think there is an ignorance and a sort of dismissiveness towards social media football fans. And actually, I think it's the greatest thing about football, because if we didn't have social media like football, Twitter, etc., then we'd have to watch people like Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville talk to us each week with their opinion, which has actually been outed as somewhat dubious because of social media. So actually, I embrace the fact that we have social media football fans now, most of which do go to football matches. So to try and say that Ten Hag's support is because of some irrelevant fan base on social media is actually ridiculous. Most match-going fans I know want Ten Hag because they want a new direction. I just think it's childish. I think it's childish. I see this a lot in life. You see it with politics as well. People who are in the minority. We had it last night on That's Football. There was a poll about whether you want Harry Kane or Cristiano Ronaldo as your number 9. And 57% went with Ronaldo. And the people who went with Harry Kane just couldn't get their head around it. It's called a vote. You lost the vote. You're in the minority. Stick with your opinion, but you're in the minority. Just because you want Pochettino doesn't mean that 85% want him as well. They don't. So, look, if you want Pochettino, that's fine. You may well end up getting your wish, but you will be in the minority. And let's not pretend if the club appoint Pochettino, 85% or 80% or 70% or whatever the sway towards Ten Hag are going to go, oh, well, let's just carry on and put a smile on her face after 9 years of failure from this board. It's not going to go well, is it? It doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what I think. If Pochettino gets the job, will I call it out as a massive mistake? Will I just get behind the manager? We'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to influence people's opinion. But what I do know is these players, given a hint of someone to blame, will blame them when we get bad results. We will get bad results next season regardless of who the manager is, whether it's Ten Hag or Pochettino. And Pochettino will have no patience from day one. And the fan base, when we get those bad results, or maybe even before, will not be very supportive. It's a fact. You can like it or not. You can be Pochettino's biggest fan. But for God's sake, understand what democracy is and understand that you're in the minority if you want Pochettino, and stop pretending that there's a swathe of United fans that are just being quiet and really want Pochettino. Because it ain't bloody true. You know, have a debate, but let's not start taking the piss out of fans and saying social media fans don't matter. Come on. If anything, there's rival fans on social media that are voting for Poch in the polls because they want us to get him. Out of context, but got a feeling this career mode is going to be as good as your United Stand FC one and the lockdown one, says Connor T. I hope so. Looking forward to it. Thank you for this super chat from Michael Neal. So let's fly straight into the show. Ralf Rangnick has apparently been offered the Austrian FA job, not the Austrian FA job. This is apparently taken place this week. Jan Åge Fjørtoft was tweeting about it as well, that they want him as their coach. And, well, look, whether he's going to take it or not, the line from Rangnick has always been that he will honour the deal that he has with Manchester United, which is to see it through to the end of the season and then become a consultant. We saw stories last night that this consultancy role will involve 6 hours a week. I mean, it's going to be very, very light in relation to his touch points in relation to Manchester United. I'm from Mexico, I live in the United States, and I don't want Pochettino, so is it just not match-going fans, but even Ten Hag gets chosen, I'm still cautious, says Marcelino. Exotic-sounding midfielders, the streets won't forget. Manchester Evening News strikes again, says Alligator. Well, I just think there's a bit of an arrogance amongst some media outlets in relation to fan opinion. You've got your opinion, well done. It's no better than anybody else's. Get on with it. That's what good journalism is, isn't it? not inflicting your opinion on other people. Look, I'm going to do a story this morning about Pochettino. Positive story about Pochettino. Don't want him at the club, but it's a news show. Got to get on with it. Simple as that. Austria are not in the World Cup, no, so it would be a rebuild for Austria. But look, if Ralf Rangnick was to leave Manchester United to go to Austria to be their manager, would it surprise me? No. Would I be massively disappointed? Yes. I feel that, look, you know, the Mirror are basically saying that Pochettino has impressed Murta and Darren Fletcher in his interviews, and he's still very much in the race for Manchester United manager. To be honest with you, Pochettino impressing Darren Fletcher, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it and I'm going to say it. This is like a beach ball impressing a clapping seal. I don't get how we've put ourselves in a position where we've brought Ralf Rangnick into this football club. We're not involving him in the managerial chat because Darren Fletcher is doing the interviews. 18 months ago, we did him a favour to let him come and train the youth to get his badges. He's now the kingmaker at Manchester United. I mean, even if he's the best technical director in the world, he's still learning on the job. I think there's a big question mark over John Murta as well. I cannot believe we are not using Ralf Rangnick, who has a proven recent track record of building football clubs. And not only that, because I don't want to repeat what I said last night, but what did we have 2 days ago from Ralf Rangnick after the Everton game? A 4-point plan on what Manchester United need to do to get back. He mentioned 3 transfer windows. He mentioned a manager that has to be backed, that has to have an identity, and the recruitment has to be around that. He basically gave us an 18th month plan to get back where we need to go. And we're not listening to him. We're going to listen to Fletcher and Murta. What's their 4-point plan? Speak to Gary Neville, speak to Rio Ferdinand, do a few keep-ups, do a few tweets about DNA, put the 99 final on MUTV on repeat. I mean, I don't know what their plan is because they're not communicating. And look, Darren Fletcher, I really hope he ends up being great. I hope Murta ends up being great. I've got no problem with these people being good, but you know what? And look, let's remember this guy called Neil Ashton. Neil Ashton, he used to be on Sunday Supplement. I think he was chief sports writer for The Sun. A couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, he leaves that role. There's a bit of a story about he's setting up this PR company and he's going to be a consultant PR for Manchester United. We've never heard of him since, but he's probably still doing the job. Is he pulling the spins, the strings on PR? Because you know what? You can't have it all your own way, Manchester United. You want to manipulate and spin everything you can to make yourselves look good. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. But your lack of communication is abysmal. It always has been. You manipulate, you lie. The Super League was a disgrace, absolute disgrace. I don't think in the year after the Super League you've done anything, really, that makes you look any better as a football club in relation to communication. Whoopee shit. Joel Glazer did a Zoom call and made a load of promises that have not been kept. Your communication's abysmal. You've got Ralf Rangnick, the manager of Manchester United, sitting down in interviews, communicating a 4-step plan as to how Manchester United can improve. Now, we can all sit there. I could do a video this afternoon, the 4-step plan to Man United improvement, and it probably would be well received. But I'm not CEO. I am not technical director. I am not interviewing. I am not coaching. I am not being listened to. Our technical director, our director of football, why can't they communicate like Ralf Rangnick has? This is where Man United have been exposed over the last few months. And it needs calling out. They've been exposed. Ralf Rangnick was brought into this football club in December as an interim manager. Everyone was very excited because it was like, look at his track record at building football clubs. Okay, he's not a great coach, but look at his track record. He comes in, the season's basically over anyway. And let's not forget, anybody who wants to criticise Ralf Rangnick, let me give you an analogy here. When Ralf Rangnick took over this club, it was basically like recruiting him as a lifeguard, right? And the club is on the side of the pool, not breathing. And he runs over, he starts giving mouth to mouth. He can't get them back, and he says to the person on the side who's recruited him, "How long's he been in the water?" "Oh, hours." Well, I can't do anything then. I can't perform CPR on something that's not going to come back. And I think that's basically what Ralf Rangnick walked into this season. It was always going to go the way it's gone. I predicted it in January. We won't get top 4. Rangnick had only been here a month. It was nothing to do with Rangnick. I could just see these players had checked out and they're not good enough. So the whole excitement about Ralf Rangnick was the ability to come into the club, survey the wreckage, and then in the summer say, let's get this, and this, and over the next 2 years, let's build this. That's what we were sold. Emil says, I agree with Roy Keane. We should not care anymore about the style of play. Manchester United always have been a winning club, no matter how we win, says Paul D. And also had another super chat there that I need. My work, Dominic was the same at the South Wales Echo, says Paul D. Okay. Yeah, there's a certain type of person there that gets influenced by a certain type of person, unfortunately. Barry says, I'm dead serious. I want Rangnick over Poch, but Ten Hag over Ralf. Ralf Fletcher is a part of the United wagon that has lost its horse for donkey, says Barry. So we were sold this story that Ralf Rangnick was coming into this football club to rebuild it. And what he's done over the last 5 months to me is irrelevant, because it was always going to end up where we are, out of top four, which is probably what's going to happen. If he gets top four, wow. If he doesn't, I expected it anyway. But what I did expect is that he would be consulted on the manager and he would be consulted on transfers. And it very much appeals that hasn't happened at all. Is Ten Hag a huge improvement on Rangnick, says Robert McCormack? I don't know, Robert. I don't know. But look, in relation to what I'm talking about, so we've now got this situation where Ralf Rangnick's getting job offers. We're hearing that he's not being discussed, he's not being consulted on the manager. We're hearing he's not being consulted on transfers. And we're hearing that his role is very reduced. And ultimately, it's Murta and Fletcher. I feel what happened is Manchester United wrote the season off in November, couldn't get the manager they wanted, and said, what do we do for 6 months that we can appease the fan base? We can basically spin this fan base for 6 months so that we don't get protests. Let's bring Ralf Rangnick in. They'll love him because of his CV. They'll think we're going to let him build the club. We won't do that, and we'll just do our own thing, and then we'll just keep him on for a few hours a week and not listen to him. And basically, it appears that that's what the club has done. They've allowed us as a fan base to think that this man's going to help us rebuild the club, and actually, they're not going to let him build the fucking football club at all. They're going to carry on with the same prats doing the job that they've been doing for the last 9 years. That's the message, and if that's not the truth, then put the message out that that's not the truth. But the message at the moment is that we don't listen to Ralf Rangnick. We've got Fletcher and Murta, and they can tell us all what to do. But the biggest failure for Manchester United, and if they ever want to listen to anything, this is what I would say, is that you've appointed Ralf Rangnick. He's been the best thing to happen to Manchester United in relation to communication in about 5 years, because he sits there in every press conference and gives you something honest. Speaks about what the club needs to do in the transfer window, why it's failing, what the weaknesses are, and what the plan needs to be to rebuild the club. It's the only communication we have had, apart from Ollie's bullshit, in 4 or 5 years. And United want to remove this person. Now, the results are not great. I accept results are terrible. Recruitment's been terrible. Our league position is terrible. Our lack of trophies is terrible. But let's just talk about communication for a minute. The breath of fresh air that Ralf Rangnick has provided is because he's actually communicated with the fan base in a way that we can understand, and it's honest. When Ralf Rangnick's not the manager and they appoint Pochettino, who's another puppet, we will go back to what we've had for the last 3 years, where they treat the fans like mushrooms and feed us on crap. They are arrogant people within that football club who think they know better than everybody else, but what they don't realise is they've got a 9-year track record of abject failure. And their communication is appalling. If Darren Fletcher is the technical director, stick him in a fucking interview and let us know what his plan is. If John Murta is the director of football, stick him in a fucking interview and let him tell us what the plan is. Because I'm tired of listening to Ralf Rangnick tell us week in, week out what we should do, and the club aren't even bloody listening to him and are actually potentially going to let him walk out the club. Whilst the people who do make the decision sit there in their office leaking out information to the same journalists that's tailored in a certain way. We are Manchester United. Communicate. Whether it's Neil Ashton, head of communications, director of football, communicate with your fucking fan base, because your behaviour over the last 9 years has been terrible. And you expect fans to keep putting their hand in the pocket for this football club, and you can't be asked to communicate with it, except for little journalist outlets that you use to put out whatever you want. Your communication is abysmal. It's absolutely abysmal. And you've been exposed over the last 6 months because you put somebody in place that apparently you're not listening to, who's exposed you week after week after week, because he sits there honestly answering questions with no spin, no agenda about how this football club needs to move, and you're going to ignore him without communicating yourselves. It's a joke. And that story that came out last night about how Man United are ignoring Rangnick whilst listening to ex-players, and they let that go out. Whoever's put that story out should be sacked. Because it's an embarrassment. It's an absolute embarrassment when we are such... And look, I will get a little bit hot under the collar because this is a massive point in our history. Generationally, for me, this is probably the lowest we've been as a football club. We have got 4 of the top 5 best paid players in the Premier League, 10 of the top 30, and we're an embarrassment as a football club that needs a total and utter rebuild. But we've already got 10 of the top 30 best paid players in the Premier League are in that squad, and we need to knock it down. From top to bottom, the club's a mess. An absolute mess. This next decision is huge, and we're dithering, doing stupid things, allowing stupid stories to leak out that show us up. Again, I'm fed up of Manchester United being laughed at. We are laughed at every bloody day by rival fans and clubs because of our behaviour and our ridiculous communication policy, which is basically just self-preservation of mates rates and this absolute obsession with the past. Oh, we've got to speak to this person. We've got to recruit this person. You're obsessed with the past. We haven't won a Premier League title for 10 years. 10 years. It's a long time. In football, it's a very long time. It's moved on. You can't talk to people who were successful 10 years ago. Most of them wouldn't even be that good in the modern game. A lot of players that were good 10, 12 years ago wouldn't even work in the modern game because it's moved on that much. We need to get in the modern game, and look, we've got somebody in Ralf Rangnick that I think is very modern thinking, and we're wasting it. We're absolutely wasting it. I can't understand why this selection process is so drawn out. Are they taking long to try and legitimise the process? Says Nicholas. Neville spends an afternoon training with Poch and wants him. McLaren spends a season with Eric Ten Hag, wins title with an unfancied team. Let's listen to McLaren. What a great point that is, by Michael Neal, actually. It is a good point. I'm not saying it's a definitive game-changing point, but I mean, look, we had Paul Ince on last week, we've had Gary Neville say it, we've had Teddy Sheringham say it, we had Wayne Rooney say it on Monday. They all want Poch because he's familiar and they like what he did at Spurs. You've got Steve McLaren, who spent a season working with Eric Ten Hag, with FC20. They held off a very strong Ajax side, managed by, I think it was Martin Jol, and they won the title together over a season. Who are you going to listen to? Somebody who's sat with Poch on a bloody pundit board or spent a week with him coaching, or you can listen to a man that's actually coached with this man that we want as our manager. And that's the bafflement about this recruitment process. As for it being drawn out, I've always feared that we're drawing it out because they're still trying today to spin a positive onto Pochettino so that when they do appoint him, they can try and move it back. I think it's oppression. I think they're trying to just drag this out as long as possible so that fans start to go, oh, we're just going to end up with Poch, what's the point? And then they go, yeah, you are going to end up with that. That could be a theory. Mark, I wrote to you last week saying Board will get rid of Ralph and then say, oh, look, Darren Fletcher, says Dazzo. The thing is, I don't mind Darren Fletcher having a job. He might end up being really good in the future, but there's no way you can go from 18 months ago training the youth, doing your coaching badges, to technical director, picking our manager at the most pivotal point in our recent history. He needs some... Even Merton needs someone like Ralf Rangnick to learn from. They're not qualified to do the job. Off topic, but I got tickets to United versus Palace in Melbourne where I live. Just trash that the first match I get to see is in the day beyond a joke, says Wade. Marcelino says, even with Eric Ten Hag, would it make a difference? Why should we trust the club to not do the same thing they did to Ralph? Well, look, Eric Ten Hag's the first small step on a mile road to being back. It's not a saviour, is it? They are interviewing who can be the best puppets for the Glazers, says Aya. Who would you want to get the job, Mark? I don't think I answered that, Tom Walker. And when are the fans going to take a proper stand? Too long the Glazers have ruined this club without consequence. Stand up and stop bending over for them, says Cormac. Well, you know what I think about that. I personally feel that there's no point in doing anything as a fan base unless we've got a viable alternative to buy the club. And at the moment, I look at Chelsea with this big list of people who want to buy the club, and I think, well, there must be people who want to buy Man United, but they need to be public about that. We need to have a viable option to buy this football club who's got the money to buy the football club and the plans to run it in the way that it needs to be run. If you had somebody like that, the fan base would get behind them, and then we can start trying to force the Glazers out. But we're not going to force the Glazers out by protesting with no alternative. Ultimately, all you're going to get is another Zoom call and another load of lies. The protests were fantastic last year. They showed that we were very unhappy. but they were never going to lead to the Glazers leaving the club. Ultimately, a lot of people were hoping we might get some shares or the stadium might get improved. None of those things have happened. There needs to be an alternative, and then you can have your movements to remove them. David, thank you very much for the super chat. Mark, what motivates you to believe in this club any longer, says Irfan? Because it's my club. I mean, if we got relegated, if we were in the National League, I'd still support it, because that's what supporting a football club's all about. I cannot get on board with anybody that goes, I've got no interest in this football club anymore. That's just not what support is. And there'll be people who are older watching this show saying, what are you talking about? I was following this club in the 70s when we got relegated. That's what support is. I understand the draining nature of it. I understand the disgust at how it's being run. It's very draining, but support is support. Poch will do what the United board wants. Ten Hag will do what he wants. United board will hire Poch, says Jazz. Well, look, let's just move on to the next bit of news then, because this is coming in from the Mirror. It's coming in from David McDonnell, and he says that, like Ten Hag, Pochettino is understood to have impressed his interviewers with John Murtagh and Darren Fletcher, outlining his vision for Manchester United, what it will take to rebuild the squad, and his strategy for taking the club back to the top. My issue with that is that Pochettino cannot talk about taking a club to the top. He's never done it. All right, he's going to win the league at PSG, but look, I'd win the league at PSG. You're expected to win the league. He's never taken a club to a major trophy in his life. So how can you talk about doing that? And people will say, well, Ten Hag hasn't, but I'll keep repeating to it. Liverpool and Man City would interview Eric Ten Hag. They would not interview Mauricio Pochettino. We need to think like a big club. We need to go with what modern big clubs would do. They wouldn't go anywhere near Pochettino. He's spent. I don't care what he's put on his PowerPoints. I'm sure he has done a good interview. He is a good coach, but he's not. What is he saying? He's probably saying, put your hooks here, here and here, because the wounds are still fresh from Spurs. Daniel Levy used to play me like a puppet, so you can. I've even got the screw holes. It'll take you no time. Let's get to work, lads. So yeah, look, I'm sure he will impress on a serious note, but his vision. He's been sacked 3 times in his last 4 jobs, and he's not won a major trophy. Like, how? What's his vision to do? If anything, I think Pochettino's CV is overachieving with small clubs, and we're a big club. We want a big vision. That's what we want. It goes on to say that Eric Ten Hag has a 1.7 million release clause, whereas Pochettino's exit from PSG is also unlikely to cost much more than 4 million in terms of compensation. So look, I don't care whether Pochettino's free or Ten Hag's 2 million. Ultimately, you go for Ten Hag, but you should never be paying more for Pochettino. But we'll have to wait and see. But look, as well, it goes on to say that there is still this divide in the fan base. Not the fan base. There is this divide in the club's hierarchy and within the club's playing staff in relation to Eric Ten Hag. Well, look, in relation to playing staff and ex-players, we shouldn't be listening to them at all. If people are saying we shouldn't be listening to the fans, well, we shouldn't be listening to ex-players, because ultimately they're just fans. And we shouldn't be listening to players anyway. In relation to the hierarchy, I think I spoke to somebody last night because I was quite frustrated about the ex-player thing. So I spoke to somebody that's quite close to the club and I said, what's going on? They were very, very cagey. They wouldn't give much away because I think the club are trying to keep a lid on a lot of things that unless they want it to go out. And I just said to them, look, this whole ex-player thing is a farce. What's going on with Ralf Rangnick? And I said, and Romano says that there are talking to Rangnick. They refused to tell me anything about Rangnick. I don't know whether they knew anything or not, but they refused to say anything about that. But they said that, look, in all honesty, there is a split in the board about who Manchester United should go for. And I was like, well, tell me some of the names then. Absolutely not. Absolutely not going to do that. And I suppose the problem with that is, if I was to say to you here, or any journalist was to say, John Murtagh wants Eric Ten Hag, such and such wants Pochettino. Whoever the people who want Pochettino, their status and legacy or whatever in that football club is going to be tainted. But there are people in that football club pushing for Poch, but they won't do it publicly, and they don't want that information out publicly as well, which should be a big hint to them that maybe what you want isn't the right thing. Because they're very vocal within the club about what they want. They want Pochettino, but they do not want it out there publicly that they are the one. And I have suspicions, but I'm not going to put a name out as a suspicion. That's completely wrong. Do we deserve to know who these people are in the club that want Ten Hag and want Pochettino? Well, there's a challenge for you as a journalist. Instead of attacking online fans, why don't you do your fucking job? Because you've all got sources. Why don't you do a job and come out with an article about who it is within that football club who wants Erik Ten Hag and who wants Pochettino? Because I tell you what, we're ready for that story. That story would be brilliant, and it would be communication. I can't find it out. I never thought I would be able to. Some people will be able to find that out. Some people have got very, 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 very good sources in that football club, and that club leaks like a hedgehog's lilo, as we know. So there are people who are journalists who have the power to give us information, but they won't because they're scared to do it. But I personally think we should know. I think we should know. I'm not bothered about the players. I couldn't give a toss if such and such player wants Poch and such wants Ten Hag. We shouldn't be listening to the players. As we said last night, it's like a rat choosing what rat poison goes down. You know, they're going to say cheese. But the reality is, within that board, we should know who wants Poch and who wants Ten Hag. Because if we do end up with Pochettino, it's on them. We can't all just go, oh, the ex-players, it's their fault. Ex-players may have been consulted. They're not board members at the club. We need to know who in this club wants who. Because if they are going to go with Pochettino, we need to know who it is. Because ultimately, if they do go with Pochettino, it's the same as the Man United squad, isn't it? I don't ever want to hear in 6 months' time, well, I'm on the board, but I wanted Ten Hag. You're all tainted by it. Richard Arnold, Darren Fletcher, John Murtagh, the Glazers, everyone else on that board. If you go with Pochettino and it doesn't work, you all picked Pochettino. It's as simple as that. If you go with Erik Ten Hag and it does work, you all pick Ten Hag. Well done. So that's the whole point of a board. You can't blame it on individuals. You collectively make the decision. You collectively decided not to sack Solskjaer after Liverpool. Maybe somebody on that board wanted him to be sacked, but, you know, it's the collective, isn't it? How much of a role do you think Sir Alex Ferguson will play in wanting Poch? He has been a big admirer of him back when he was at Spurs. You see, I'm not comfortable with the Sir Alex Ferguson thing, Sean, because Sir Alex Ferguson is a legend, an absolute legend. For me, he's beyond reproach. You can't say anything bad about him in my mind. But I don't think Sir Alex Ferguson, from the interviews and stories and people that we've spoken to over the last decade, actually has as much influence as people think. I don't think he can walk into that boardroom and say, get Pochettino, I don't care what you want. Those days are gone. He doesn't have that role within the club. If all of the board wanted Ten Hag and Sir Alex said he wants Poch, we'd get Ten Hag. So even if Sir Alex wanted Pochettino, there'd have to be other people that did as well. And that's a fact. So I think this obsession about what Sir Alex thinks, his opinion on his own wouldn't be enough. There'd have to be other people that wanted it. If they reluctantly appoint Ten Hag, we'll be interested to see if they sack him quickly after a tiny blip and appoint Pochettino, says Angus. Well, if that happens, obviously you'd have to run through the circumstances, but if we gave Erik Ten Hag 2 or 3 years and it didn't work and then Pochettino was available and he was a decent option, I don't mind us doing that. But let's just make sure we get the right decision now. Interestingly, on Pochettino, there was a story from The Athletic this morning actually saying that Harry Kane wants to know, he's intrigued by the Manchester United project before he decides what he does next season. Harry Kane to me stinks of Pochettino, and Harry Kane stinks to me of a United type of signing. Harry Kane's a world-class striker, there's no doubt about it. But for £100 million, we could get 3 players. And we need about 6 players. So if the choice is Harry Kane and 1 other player, or no Harry Kane and 4 players, I'm going to go for 4 players. Harry Kane's a fantastic player, but he's the icing on a cake we haven't baked. Simple as that. And we've already done that with Ronaldo. I mean, Ronaldo's fantastic, and I think if Ronaldo's back for Everton, we've got a better chance of beating Everton with Ronaldo than we haven't. But ultimately, we didn't get the CDM, did we? And we've suffered from that all season. So I would also say, why would Harry Kane want to come to Manchester United? I thought he wanted to win trophies. If he's coming to United at 29, we ain't winning a Premier League by the time you're in your early 30s, mate. So you just come in for money and status. I thought you were about trophies. If I was Harry Kane, I'd be staying at Spurs with Conte if that was on offer, because I think that offers more in the immediate future than what United offers in the short term. But I don't think United should be looking at Harry Kane. But if we are looking at Harry Kane, it stinks more of Pochettino. United would love Harry Kane. Kane on the back of this new kit for the summer, sells your shirts, social media clicks. You know, I can see why United would want to do that deal. But there are... we've spoke about this 2 weeks ago. I was starting to feel excited around Ten Hag, but I'm quickly reminded that the way we handle everything is wrong and the manager won't change anything. We need to clear the boards, as Carvit. So let's buy a few shares so you can join investor meetings and ask questions for the fans. It doesn't work like that, Michael. It doesn't work like that. The Glazers have got that club on lockdown in relation to shares. Petitions seem to get things done in the UK. Start a petition for Mark for Ten Hag to be united, says Jazz. Yeah, that's not going to work either. But I think with the way that we are run, or have been run over the last 9 years, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I don't even want to use Poch and Ten Hag, but you'll know which is which. There's two choices for United. They go down a road where they try and recruit a Harry Kane, a big shirt selling superstar, and maybe get, and that's the route. Or they go down a different route where they buy 3 or 4 players. Maybe they can get a Darwin Nunez. Maybe they get an Anthony. Maybe they get a decent CDM like a Lema or a Tchouameni or someone like that. 3 or 4 players for 150 million would be a different route. Or we go down, the very expensive one superstar signing supplemented by maybe another. We need to go down this route. We need to go down the new route. We need to go down the route. I mean, look at Liverpool last night. I'm doing the Champions League watch along, and that's football. Diaz scores the goal that kills the game. They've spent 50 million quid on him. He's worth 100 already. He's worth 100 million already in 3 months. The recruitment of Liverpool under Klopp has been ridiculous. They buy these players for 50 million quid, and their success rate is ridiculous. They're well scouted. They're not superstar signings when they buy them, and suddenly they become superstars. It's enviable. Man United are a team that's always been about width. Liverpool's fullbacks are in the top 5 for putting crosses into the box in the Premier League this year. None of United fullbacks are in the top 30. Liverpool, somehow, under Jurgen Klopp, have become the closest thing to Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, Liverpool fans might not like that, but they'll like the success. He's built a team that evolves and evolves and evolves in his vision, and the signings they make are ridiculous. And they don't spend anywhere near as much as us. I mean, look, they've probably got Konate and Diaz for the price we paid for Harry Maguire. They're just so good at recruitment. And it's not rocket science. It's like Rangnick said. You go around Europe, sometimes in the Premier League, but mainly Europe, looking at players for 40 to 50 million pounds, and you scout them and you bring them in, 4 or 5 of them, and your team changes overnight. And that's what you've got to develop them. You've got to have a good coach. This is the vision that Rangnick has told to the club. He said it publicly 2 days ago. And we're still talking about 29-year-old Harry Kane for 100 million quid, which is the same as 90 million Pogba 6 years ago, or 80 million pound Harry Maguire, or 75 million pound Jadon Sancho. We've got to reduce, and we'll reduce the wages as well. European players are not going to demand 200 grand a week like Harry Maguire did. Like, they're going to want probably 100. They're cheaper in fee, they're cheaper in wages, and they're better than what we're paying for over here. That is the new world. That is the new direction, and it's the one that Rangnick sort of hinted at. I think it's the one that Ten Hag would take us down. I'm not so convinced Pochettino would. I'm done with this board if they choose Poch, says Seb Watson. But regardless of who the manager is, that's the route we need to take. This bloody shirt-selling strategy, which they will want to keep doing because they will want to sell shirts for Adidas and etc. We need to be more of a football club, and that has always been the problem because we are run by people who want the dividends. They want to keep the debt. We're still hundreds of millions of pounds in debt, by the way. They're still taking dividends out of the club every year. We're talking about a manager in a new direction, but ultimately the decision makers still want to bleed us for money. But there's no viable option elsewhere, and that's the scary thing. But yeah, look, whether Ralf Rangnick stays on or not, we'll have to wait and see. Whether they're listening to him or not, we'll have to wait and see. But I do feel that we've been lied to again. And it's sad, really, because it's a year ago that the Super League came out where we got lied to and treated like shit. And I feel that a year later, we're still being lied to and treated like shit. The communication thing, I know I lost it a little bit there. But the communication in this football club is appalling. Really appalling. And as I said, I don't think Rangnick's done particularly well with this team. I don't think anybody would have done, inheriting what Solskjaer left and what players we've got. But what he has done, A-class, 5-star, is communicate with us and basically tell us what needs to happen at the club. The fact that the club are letting him sit there in a press conference every week, feeding out these great ideas and then not listening to him. I mean, Darren Fletcher should be sat there with the journalists writing the notes down, learning. I think we got lied to. It appears we got lied to, and it appears that the same people that were making the decisions before Rangnick came in are still going to be the same people afterwards. And what I would say is that, so we've got this guy in Ralf Rangnick who's talking a lot of sense about how this club can rebuild. You're not listening to him, but you're not communicating with us. The club communication is abysmal. Why can't Darren Fletcher sit and do an interview? Is he not good enough to do that yet? Has he not learnt that? He's not had the training yet? Why can't he do it? Why can't John Murter do it on the regular? Why are we not being communicated to by the people that are making the biggest decision we've ever made in 30 years? Over 30 years. I'm just appalled. Absolutely appalled. And all we get is these crappy little stories about how Fletcher and Murter are impressed by this and impressed by that. I'll tell you what I'll be impressed with. I feel a lot easier about your decision making if you actually communicated with the fans and made us believe in you. Because ultimately, leaking your stories to your journalist friends, who are you? I don't bloody know who you are. You should be sat in press conferences. You should be sat there doing interviews under scrutiny, but you won't do it. We're Manchester United, one of the biggest football clubs in the world, and our technical director, our CEO, our director of football, our owner are terrified to sit in front of journalists and actually answer questions about what the vision for the club is. That really fills me with confidence. Rangnick can sit there, Mourinho can sit there, but the people who are actually making the decisions, they're terrified to sit down and have an interview. Terrified. And these people are meant to be leading us forward, and they can't even fucking do an interview and tell us what's happening at the club unless it's staged with pre-prepared questions. If you're good at your job, you can sit there in front of anybody, difficult questions or nice questions, on the spot, and tell people what your vision is. Does it not scare you that these people are not able to do that? They have to hide away and, be the decision makers. The communication's abysmal. It really is. It's the end for the Glazers if they choose Poch, and that won't work. The fans will crucify the owners. It will look like the Super League fell out again, says Seb Watson. Well, I don't know whether that will happen or not, but I certainly think that it's very naive to think that next season we won't have some bad results. If we have Ten Hag, there will be patience, and those bad results will be not liked, but they'll be seen as part of the build. If you bring Pochettino in and we get bad results, you know how the world works. People will go, I never wanted him in the first place. He's clearly not the right man. There'll be no patience. Whether that's fair or not, there won't be. And United need to be eyes open to that. You should go to Old Trafford on match day and do a poll, says Joseph. But we don't need to, Joseph. The polls have been done. There's loads of polls that have been done. And the reality is, in the United fan base, real fans, match-going fans, worldwide fans, for me, they're just fans. I would say, it's fair to say, that, and remember these results get manipulated by people voting for Poch who aren't United fans. I would say, if you could poll every single United fan on what they wanted, you would have somewhere between 70 and 90% wanting Ten Hag, and I would predict it would be more 80% to 90%, but certainly 70 to 90% would want Ten Hag. Maybe, I think it would be over 80, but that would be all fans, because I speak to all fans. I know a lot of fans of Manchester United, a lot of match-going fans, a lot of worldwide fans, and it's because people want change. They want a new direction, and Pochettino doesn't reflect change or direction. We all know what he is. We all know what he did at Spurs. We all know he's been sacked 3 out of 4 times. We know his away record's dodgy. We know he doesn't really win trophies. We know ultimately he's classed as a bit of a bottler. Everybody knows what Pochettino is. Ten Hag presents something new. And I think whether it works or not, that's what fans want. We need a club reset, says Matt Hunt. Exactly. Anyway, look, I'm back at 2 o'clock. Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you smash a like on the video. I suppose my biggest thing from this is communication is abysmal at that football club, and they should communicate a lot better. This is the biggest decision in our recent history, and it's an embarrassment. And I always look at what rival fans are saying about us. And when I look around at what rival fans are saying about this managerial position, we're getting ridiculed. We're getting laughed at. They're like, they've had 6 months and they're still desperately trying to figure out a way to appoint Pochettino when the man they need is right in front of them. We're being laughed at. Rival fans are absolutely praying that we appoint Pochettino, and that says everything. Why are we dragging this out? Because I think they're terrified of making a decision. Read into that whatever you want. I think they're terrified of making a decision, which ain't strong leadership, is it? The Glazers should sell up and new owners should sack all the board members apart from Sir Alex and bring in professional football board members, says Chris. Well, yeah, that's what would happen if we got new owners, wouldn't it? Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you smash a like on the video. Thanks everyone who's become a member in the last couple of days, by the way, because we have got that exclusive content kicking in from tomorrow. You can vote for which head-to-head video you want as the first members video on the community tab for the members. Thanks everyone for that, and I will see you a little bit later on. Remember, tonight's a 7 o'clock show as well. 8 o'clock I'm doing That's Football watch along for the Chelsea Madrid game and Bayern Munich Villarreal. So I will speak to you all in a bit. Thanks for watching.